And basically, I just wanted to start briefly with, let's see, we're at 9:30. I think we're running on time. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about the Product Stewardship Council, the basics on product stewardship, producer responsibility, what does that mean, the movement of the state, and getting into what is the problem. I think you're kind of getting clear pretty fast what the problem is if you weren't clear when you came here, and also the attempts to solve the problem that we've had in California to date and in other states, and then how to stay connected so we don't lose the momentum that we're going to gain here today. So first, this is a slide that I pulled from Cal Recycle, which is the waste agency overseeing waste management in California, for those of you who are not from our industry. But they adopted Strategic Directive 5 that says that Cal Recycle will seek statutory authority to foster cradle-to-cradle producer responsibility and develop relationships with the stakeholders that result in producer-financed and producer-managed systems. So really, what does producer responsibility mean? It means that the producer designs, funds, and operates the system. That's a complete paradigm shift from what we've been doing, which is, in this country, it's been primarily government and taxpayers and garbage rate payers funding everything from the back end, whether they use the product or not. They're just, it's kind of like a socialized system, basically, of everybody pays for everything. And then it all goes into, unless it's rates where we do have some rate by bin size, that's about the closest we're getting to pay for what you use. But this is a shift that kind of needs to happen, because local governments, as we know, in this state, are broke. Very, very broke. I don't know how else to say it, but they are cutting staff, they are cutting resources. I know LA counties had to reduce the number of mobile units, mobile household hazardous waste events that they had, I think by 7 this year they cut. There's not enough money to collect what's out there. So if we do not shift how we fund the system and get a sustainably funded system, we will not be able to cover sharps or many other problem products that we have. So the Waste Management Board also adopted a definition of producer responsibility, or as it's called, extended producer responsibility, where you're extending the responsibility beyond just the sale of the product. It is the extension of the responsibility of producers and all entities involved in the product chain to reduce the cradle-to-cradle impacts of a product and its packaging. But the primary responsibility has to lie with the producer or the brand owner who makes the design and marketing decisions. Does that kind of make sense intuitively, that the people who actually design this stuff and make it and sell it and profit from it may have a share in the responsibility? And this is done all over the world, and actually we're one of the last countries to do this on a broad scale, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Our nonprofit, the California Product Stewardship Council, actually formed when the state imposed what we call the universal waste disposal ban. And again, if you're not from our industry, universal waste is universally found, but it's also hazardous, things like batteries, fluorescent lamps, and so forth. And sharps are considered, what are they? It's not a universal waste, but it's a hazard, because if we throw it in the trash, obviously people can get stuck. So they banned those from disposal in 2008, actually by law. But we formed after the universal waste ban was imposed, because local government said, wait a minute, this isn't working. This ban without a plan approach that government is taking and just saying, all you 500+ jurisdictions out there, please figure it out. And that's very inefficient. And especially when people move city to city, it's a different system, and then you have to reteach them, and there's a different message and a different messenger. It's not very effective, it's not cost effective, and the system costs can be very, very high. So we formed to shift our whole product waste management system away from one that is government funded and ratepayer financed to one that relies on producer responsibility to reduce our public costs and drive improvements in the design of the products. And there are some products that can be redesigned, and there's some products that can't. And maybe there are sharps, I know, that they can be retracted. There may be a different delivery mechanism for the drug. I don't know. Maybe there isn't. Maybe we must have the sharps that are not retractable. But if we do, then somebody's going to have to pay for them, or else we are going to have people getting stuck and having them in the wrong place. So our council formed 5 years ago as a nonprofit. These are counties that since that time have adopted resolutions in support of this policy concept of producer responsibility. It includes LA and all these cities. And so right now we have 124 local governments in the state that have adopted these policies and say that they support this approach in concept. And we have many business partners, including waste haulers like Recology and Republic, Waste Management, CRA, different groups in our business, paint companies, Nortec, which is a processor. There's many different types of companies that join us, and the reason is that we all have to work together to solve this problem. No one entity is going to have the whole picture to solve it, and so that's again why we have these kinds of workshops, so that we can bring people together to solve problems together. And Recology, one of their reasons for joining us, this is Mike Sangiacomo, their president and CEO. Their whole goal and tagline is waste zero. And you can't get to a zero waste goal if you've got a lot of products coming to market that are designed for disposal. So that's very important to them. And for Republic Services, they say they are, this really fits with their mission, that they want to be materials managers, and also they have a very big concern with health and safety, as does every hauling company. They don't want their staff getting stuck. It's a horrible situation, and it's costly, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. Home-generated sharps waste means hypodermic needles, pen needles, intravenous needles, lancets, and other devices that are used to penetrate the skin. So that's really, just in case you were wondering what exactly are we talking about, it's this, and it's the home-generated type. The grant that we're working on and the project we're working on, we're not worried pretty much about the hospitals and the institutions. They've got their sharps handled. It's the stuff that's going home to the public for themselves and their animals. That's really what's ending up on the lines. So the state passed SB 1305 in 2006. It was effective in 08, and it did impose the disposal ban on sharps, and it has some container requirements so that things just can't come back in a paper bag, or, as was said in that video, just a hard container with a lid. It has to be an FDA container, and then management and disposal requirements for the sharps. But the enforcement was kind of lacking in the bill. And again, because we call it a disposal ban without a management plan, there's nobody that, everybody's trying to figure this out for themselves. The hauler's trying to figure it out, the local government's trying to figure it out. We're all at the back end, what do we do, what do we do? And quite frankly, we're not able to do it. It's not working, what we're doing, and this is years later. These are some slides from CalRecycle, and I want to thank Burke Lucy for these. But they've done some surveys, and basically, the numbers have come down from where they were. Much higher percentages were admitted to be going in the trash until this recent survey, but 33% are ending up in the trash. 36% are being put in a strong container of some sort and put in the trash. 19% of people are bringing them back to their medical providers. 7% are going to household hazardous waste facilities. And again, I think what Ted said is true. They're inconvenient. Household hazardous waste facilities are usually not open very frequently. Their hours of operation are hard to figure out and work with your schedule, and they're usually out of people's way. People don't plan to go there. It's not on their normal route, so we are not getting anywhere near what we should be getting back. And then pharmacies are 2%, and I thought this was interesting. Mail-back programs are only 2%. And I think that's because of the cost. We found that in general with solid waste, any kind of waste, people, when they see it as having no value to them, they're not willing to pay for, again, they paid for it, they used it, they're done with it, and they really don't want to pay for it again at the back end. And that's why sometimes producer responsibility models work better, because the full life cycle cost is in the product price, and it's paid for when they see value in the product, which is when they purchased it. The barriers to proper disposal, then, again, most of the reason is 30% that people do not know where to take it. They just don't know where to go. In fact, we found out today from Hector here at the hospital that they have a lot of containers that are ending up in the parking lot because people just don't know where to bring them, so they just leave them in the parking lot. So he's got a safety issue with the public just dropping them off in the street. The stores won't take them. 20% of the people said that. 13% was the cost. And then proper storage of containers, extra effort, language barriers, there's a few other reasons, but these are the things we have to overcome. But the biggest thing is that they don't know where to go. So that's something, if we can solve that, we're going to solve about 50% of the problem if we can get some stores and other retail or community drop-offs available. The best method to reach the public on how to do the proper management is actually at points of sale. And we've done other focus groups for paint and other projects and batteries and lamps, and they all say the same thing. I'm busy, I don't listen to radio that much anymore, I don't really read the paper that much, but I really do. When I'm buying the product, that's when I want to know, because that's when I'm thinking about it. So it's point of sale education. The cost of sharp sticks. I thought this was very interesting. Again, this is from CalRecycle. They're estimating that the total cost to California is $226 million a year for the needle sticks. This has a dollar figure. And I don't know what the range of error might be with this number, but if it's anywhere near right, that's a lot of money. So this is something that if we do solve the problem, we could be saving back-end costs and a lot of grief for the people who've been stuck. And these are just some pictures of how we're finding sharps. We're finding them, they're getting flushed down the toilet. The people at the water treatment plant are having to deal with them. They're being found in parks. I was actually going to a meeting on sharps at a Starbucks, and there was a needle sitting right there outside of the Starbucks just on the corner. And then our picking lines again, unfortunately, a lot of illegal drug users do just put them in soda bottles, and they're ending up at our recycling facilities. In fact, Shasta County has decided to put their drop-off containers at the 2020 recycling centers because that's where most of the most dangerous sharps were ending up. And the people at the facility needed them to actually contain them and get them safely out of their way. And then, of course, just in the trash. So the attempts to solve these problems go back many years that I've been working on it. Cal Recycles had workshops on this for years. They gave us a grant we worked on in Calaveras and some rural counties. We did multiple meetings there, heard that even some of the local dairy farmers are being told to bury their big, large needles that they use on cows and put them in coffee cans out on the farm, in the ground. The Sonoma Grant Project, we tried to bring everybody together there, but again, there was no, it's really hard to get people to pony up money. And so they talked about maybe sponsorships of kiosks, and can some local people sponsor a kiosk, get their names on the kiosk, get credit for paying the cost, and none of it was really panning out. The sharps collection pilot we did for Yolo County last year, it was during the project, actually one of the project manager, her daughter became diagnosed with diabetes and started using needles and found firsthand that she was being told 3 different things by 3 different sources, doctors and pharmacies, what to do, and they were all wrong. So there's a huge amount of misinformation out there about what to do with sharps. And then in their project, we did a great job of getting the containers out. We bought thousands of containers. We gave them out. People were bringing them back to the landfill. But again, once the grant is up, they don't have enough money to keep it going. So we don't have a sustainable program, and then the public's frustrated again. And it's almost worse to start a program you cannot continue, because then the public's trained and they'll illegally dump it or bring it to some place that they were able to bring it before. And then we're working on this grant with Del Norte County, and then the Placer County has been very frustrated with their situation on sharps and pharma, and they designed a whole working group. They had some of the producers of the sharps and the pharmaceuticals there, and again, they've received no help either. So at this point, you know, legislation's been discussed repeatedly because there just seems to be really no willingness by enough people in the product chain to get a shared responsibility system, primarily with the producers taking some lead in this, that we've had no real solutions, and it's been very frustrating for the local governments. But we hope today we can break through that, come up with some good ideas. So by law now, the methods that we are allowed to manage the sharps are really 4 options, which is the household hazardous waste facilities, if they have one, a consolidation point, a medical waste generator facility, or a mailback. The first option, for those of you who haven't seen a household hazardous waste facility, this is what they look like. This is where they table the paint and they sort and they put everything away. Just as an example, I'm going to use Burbank as an example because that's where we are. Craig told me that currently they don't accept sharps here. They don't have enough staff time to do it. So that's off the table here. The challenge is even when it is available in communities, it's inconvenient. Some communities are down to 1 day a month operations. Option 2 is the consolidation points, and these are facilities that accept home-generated sharps in proper containers if they can obtain a one-time written approval from the local approval agency, accept waste in containers that meet the definition of the FDA's safe containers, and then ensure that the waste was handled, stored, and transported as a medical waste. And in Burbank, we have none of those, that we know of, at least. And then we have public consolidation points. The county of LA, I guess, is working with Burbank, and they have safe community collection centers. They have 2 within 6 miles of here. 6 hours, they're open each on the weekends only, from 9 to 3.
Excuse me, I
Yeah.
don't think this is county, this is city.
Is it the city? Oh, he just left.
No, it's
Oh, it's a combination of the county and the city is the discussion.
Yes, there is.
There's a debate in the audience. But we'll just say it this way. A local government entity is partnering with Burbank to have safe collection centers. But they're 6 miles away and they're not very convenient. They're only open on weekends. They have no toxic rover pickup, which other communities, some have, where actually it comes door to door. That's typically pretty expensive, but I've seen them, the costs are coming down. And then needle exchange programs, and they have none of those here either. Then option 3 is a medical waste generator collection. And then this is an example from Vacaville up in Northern California, where they actually approached the local Sutter Hospital and Kaiser, and they actually got drop-off boxes put into the hospitals. And the city agreed to do the media and do the outreach to promote the proper take back at these facilities, and they partnered also with Recology. And this is what the box looks like. It's unmanned, it's a drop box, and it's right there at the hospital, and the public can drive up and just put their containers in it. And then it's just figuring out again who's going to pay. The hospital offered to host the facility and actually provide the containers to their patients free. And then the city was doing the public education, and I believe they were also working with grants and other ways to fund the collection. So I haven't talked to the gal who runs it, Carrie Holmes, lately to get an update. This is just an example, but I wanted you to see what the boxes look like and the kind of partnerships, because you can work it out in your community with whatever funding opportunity works best. But then there's the other option of mail back, and for especially rural communities, this is very convenient, or people who live far away from drop-off locations, very, very handy. But I've been working on this, as I said, for many years in Sonoma as an independent consultant. I facilitated this group here, and that's their health officers, their veterinarians, everybody was there. And again, we can come up with solutions all day on how. Always the question comes down to who's going to pay. That's really the big question. And their stakeholder recommendations, again, were to establish drop-off points throughout the county, provide containers at the point of sale, provide public education at the point of sale, which we agreed now is what works and what people want, make the program easy and convenient, use the same containers for all users, so there's no stigma if they are a drug user. That's fine, we still want them back, we still want them safe. Encourage the sponsorship of the kiosks by people who could pay for the collection and put their logos on them, and then start that education with the veterinary and health offices. And we did learn that some vets were taking back from their patients, others were not. And they just said, put them in a hard container and throw them in the trash or whatever. So even if nothing else, you can talk to your local distributors of sharps and your vets and let them know the proper way and give them flyers, because if nothing else, they're gonna give them to the people, and people at least have some information when they're handed sharps to treat their pet, or whomever they're treating. It's a person. So overall, with producer responsibility, we've had legislation from 2008 through last year. We've had 7 different bills approved that Product Stewardship Council has either supported or co-sponsored, as with the mercury thermostat bill. And in fact, I was testifying at a hearing yesterday on the paint and carpet regulations that are rolling out. But this is exciting that we're starting to see where industries are ready to be good stewards, and they want to be good stewards of their product, and they're creating jobs doing it, because it takes more people to collect and manage a product than it does to simply containerize it and throw it in a hole in the ground or a landfill or an incinerator. So typically these are job creators, and as long as the industry is ready, it works. But in this industry, we've not heard yet that there's a lot of support. But of course, Tom's going to address that from his company, Ultimed, in a little bit, because they have some ideas on this. So just briefly, I want to thank the Product Stewardship Institute for this couple of next slides. But in state legislation, there's several states that have disposal bans, California and Massachusetts. And in New York, they have hospitals and nursing homes are required to accept sharps. In Colorado, they have bills that are in negotiations now. We're not sure if it's going to pass on submitting plans on how pharmaceutical companies will manage their sharps. And in Maine and Washington, they actually have legislation on product stewardship right now on sharps. And they're being debated, and I think Tom can speak to that because he was testifying in Maine just a few days ago. So the Maine bill is basically a solid producer responsibility bill. It would require the sharps manufacturers to do education and outreach excuse me, Propose performance standards. Manage them as biomedical waste, submit plans, report to the state on it, and then pay a registration fee to the state if they're going to operate in the state. Then the state would review the plans, their stewardship plans, and how they plan to roll this out. And there would be no requirement on entities to collect. They could be at pharmacies, hospitals, clinics, and so forth, but there's no requirement for retailers or anybody to take them back. So this is the kind of thing that's happening across this country, the discussions that are happening, and Washington State has a bill that they're discussing as well. So it's very similar, mostly for self-injected pharmaceuticals. So if you'd like to keep up on this kind of thing, we have a listserv. Just give us your card. Actually, everyone here that's registered, we're adding you to the listserv. You can always take yourself off. Just sign the pledge, come to our workshops, and invite us to speak. But this is not going away. It's actually going to become a bigger and bigger discussion. We've been working on this for 5 years. I personally have been working on this for over 10. And there's not many of us in this country that can say that. And the reason I'm so interested in it is because I really felt that we weren't really solving the problems. We were actually just putting Band-Aids all over the place, and it was time to get to the root of it, get sustainably funded systems, and get them to work. Yeah, Ted.